Welcome back to our journey into the heart of the Middle Ages. If you thought the world was all kings and knights, think again. Today, we're stepping behind walls of stone and faith, into a world that moved to a different rhythm entirely. The monastery. Imagine a place set apart from the world, yet right at its center, behind a tall moss-grown wall. Time isn't measured in harvests or market days, but in the sacred hours of prayer, matins, lauds, vespers. The monks called this the opus dei, the work of God, and it was their life's purpose. Long before the sun touched the horizon, a bell would ring, its single note cutting through the misty fields. While villagers slept, the brothers would rise in silence, bare feet on cold stone, flickering candlelight in narrow corridors, the scent of wax and sleep in the air. They moved like shadows into the dim chapel, their voices rising as one, low, resonant, ancient Latin filling the vaulted space. They weren't seeking beauty, but order, the divine order they believed held the world together, even as war and famine raged outside. To enter a medieval monastery was to renounce everything: wealth, family, even your own will. The world was bounded by walls, but within them a strange kind of freedom bloomed. The monastery was a small kingdom of its own. At its heart, the church; around it, the dormitory, the kitchen, the infirmary, orchards, and fish ponds shimmering in the morning mist. Every space had a purpose, and every purpose was prayer. The abbot was both father and lord. Below him, a whole community of roles, not ambitions. The prior, the cellarer, tending the stores, the infirmarian caring for the sick, and lay brothers working the fields. Each monk owned nothing. His robe was coarse wool, his sandals thin. He ate little, slept less, and spoke rarely, because silence was considered a form of truth. Yet, there was a quiet joy in this life. The morning sun spilling gold onto the cloister arches, the rise and fall of the chant like the sea. These were the small illuminations that made their world radiant. The day was divided with incredible precision. At midnight, matins, their voices weaving a tapestry of psalms in the cold dark. At sunrise, lauds, a chorus to greet the dawn, followed by a simple breakfast of bread and weak ale, eaten in silence. Then came prime, when the day's labor began. Some went to the gardens, others to mend fences, and some to the scriptorium. In the heart of the monastery lay this quiet room where words became acts of devotion. Scribes sat bent over their desks for hours, the air still, filled only with the scratch of quill on parchment and the smell of ink. They copied scriptures, ancient philosophy, and medical texts. Every letter was a prayer. They stained their fingers and strained their eyes, believing they were shaping something immortal. Many of the books they copied would survive for centuries, long after their bones turned to dust. In this way, these monks were the quiet keepers of civilization's flame. Beyond the scriptorium was the herb garden, a fragrant, living pharmacy. The monks knew more of medicine than many physicians. They grew sage, thyme, and comfrey, understanding that every plant held a balance of virtue and vice. Healing to them was about restoring harmony in the body and in the soul. When death came, it was met not with fear, but with peace, the final bell tolling not as a farewell, but as a promise. Though they were cloistered, the world still knocked at their gates. Travelers, beggars, and pilgrims came seeking rest or a blessing. The monks welcomed every stranger as Christ in disguise. But this ordered peace wasn't without its struggles. Monks wrestled with pride, envy, and doubt. The silence that protected them could also imprison them. The battle was fought inward, fierce and invisible. And what about women? In convents, nuns followed the same sacred rhythm. Their world was woven with spinning embroidery and the care of children. They created stunning tapestries, and their music was clear and sweet. Many found a quiet freedom in their seclusion, a space to read, write, and become mystics whose visions of divine love would echo through the centuries. The monastery's rhythm mirrored the turning year, from the planting of spring to the long prayers of winter, and when a monk died, he was buried within the walls. There was no mourning, only completion. The bell would toll, and the next morning the prayers would continue. The rhythm never broke. Now, let's leave the sacred silence and step into the chaotic, vibrant heart of medieval life, the marketplace. If the monastery was the world in stillness, the market was the world in roaring motion. The air here quivers with noise, the clang of iron on cobblestones, the shouts of vendors, the hum of 1,000 conversations. Here, beneath fluttering banners, the real world came together. At dawn, carts creaked in from the countryside, piled high with onions, grain, and wool. The smell of hay, sweat, and wood smoke filled the air. A fishmonger set down his barrel of salted herring. A tanner hung his hides, and a baker dusted flour over loaves, split like laughter, and the voices. Bargaining, shouting, laughing, arguing. A town crier proclaiming a new edict. A beggar praying for a coin. A child pointing at a rare sugarloaf from a distant land. Every stall was a stage, every trader an actor. "That's too dear," one man would cry. The merchant would smile, "but worth every penny." This was the true alchemy of the market, turning need into exchange. Among the crowd were the merchants, the wanderers between worlds. Their boots were dusty, their stories rich. They spoke of faraway cities, of ships as tall as churches, and spices that scented the air. They belonged to powerful guilds, brotherhoods of craft and commerce that guarded their secrets fiercely, how to dye the richest blue or forge the strongest steel. In this world, a man's reputation was worth more than his gold. But trade was a gamble. The roads were rough and choked with mud. Bandits prowled the forests. Merchants traveled in convoys for safety, sharing stories and fears around crackling campfires. And yet, they went, because trade was the thread binding kingdoms together. English wool went to Flanders, Flemish cloth to Italy, and spices from the east to every powerful table in Europe. In the pouch of a single merchant, you might find coins from 10 different lands. Wealth was movement, and in the late Middle Ages, the world was beginning to move faster than ever before. From the silent, timeless rhythm of the monastery to the vibrant, chaotic pulse of the market, these two worlds, seemingly opposites, were the twin engines of medieval society, one preserving the soul in the past, the other forging the future, one bargain at a time. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey. If you enjoyed stepping back in time with us, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next chapter exploring life in the Middle Ages. See you next time.